The American billionaire mocked the maid's daughter in Japanese, thinking no one would understand his cruel words. But the 6-year-old girl turned to him and fluently replied in the same language, with a phrase that left him completely speechless in front of everyone. Before we dive in, whether you're having your morning coffee or winding down for the night, you're exactly where you need to be. The California sun blazed mercilessly over Beverly Hills as Maria Rodriguez wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, careful not to dirty the pristine white marble floor she had just polished. The Tanaka mansion sprawled across 3 acres of manicured perfection, a monument to wealth that seemed to mock her worn shoes and faded uniform. For 5 years she had cleaned these floors, dusted these chandeliers, and maintained the illusion of effortless luxury that only money could buy. "Mama, I finished my homework," came a soft voice from the corner of the kitchen where 6-year-old Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, her second-hand tablet balanced on her knees. The little girl's dark eyes sparkled with intelligence far beyond her years, though few people ever bothered to notice. To the wealthy residents of this mansion, she was invisible, just another shadow in the background of their opulent lives. "That's wonderful, Mija," Maria replied in a whisper, glancing nervously toward the grand staircase. Mr. Tanaka had specific rules about children in the house. Emma was only allowed to accompany her mother to work during summer vacation because Maria couldn't afford childcare. And even then, the little girl had to remain silent and unseen, like a ghost haunting the edges of someone else's paradise. Emma returned to her tablet, her small fingers swiping through a Japanese language tutorial with practiced ease. For the past 8 months, she had been teaching herself Japanese, along with Mandarin, French, and Korean. The tablet, a discarded model she'd found at a thrift store, its screen cracked but functional, had become her window to worlds beyond the cramped 1-bedroom apartment she shared with her mother in East LA. While other 6-year-olds watched cartoons, Emma devoured language lessons, mathematics videos, and science documentaries with an appetite that seemed insatiable. The sound of expensive Italian leather shoes clicking against marble announced Marcus Tanaka's arrival before he appeared. At 35, he was everything the American dream promised to those who clawed their way to the top. Handsome, wealthy, and utterly convinced of his own superiority. His perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit probably cost more than Maria earned in 6 months. His dark hair was styled with precision, and his cold eyes surveyed his domain with the detached assessment of someone who had forgotten what it meant to struggle. "Maria," he called out, his voice carrying the casual authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. "I'm expecting guests this afternoon. Make sure the West Terrace is immaculate. And that child," he gestured vaguely toward Emma without actually looking at her, "needs to be quiet. I have important calls to make." "Yes, Mr. Tanaka," Maria replied, her head bowed slightly in the posture of deference she had perfected over years of service work. Marcus strode past them toward his home office, already pulling out his phone to check the Asian stock markets. He had built his fortune in tech investments, turning a small inheritance from his grandfather into a billion-dollar empire through ruthless business acumen and an uncanny ability to predict market trends. Born in the United States to Japanese immigrant parents who had worked themselves to exhaustion in their small restaurant in San Francisco, Marcus had vowed never to struggle like they had. He had achieved that goal spectacularly, though in the process he had also developed a contempt for anyone who hadn't climbed as high as he had. Emma watched him go, her observant eyes taking in every detail. She had learned to read people in the way that children who grow up on the margins often do, studying expressions, body language, and tones of voice to navigate a world that saw her as unimportant. She had noticed that Mr. Tanaka never smiled at her mother, never said thank you, and never acknowledged the 12-hour days Maria worked to keep his mansion perfect. "Mama," Emma whispered when Marcus was out of earshot. "Why is he always angry?" Maria sighed, kneeling down to cup her daughter's face gently. "Some people forget to be kind when they have too much, Mija. But we don't judge them. We do our work, we stay grateful for what we have, and we remember that kindness costs nothing." But Emma, young as she was, could see that kindness wasn't the only thing that cost nothing. Cruelty, it seemed, came just as free. 2 hours later, Emma sat in her designated corner of the kitchen, earbuds in place, fully absorbed in an advanced Japanese grammar lesson, Her lips moved silently as she practiced the complex pitch accents that distinguished Japanese from the other languages she was learning. On the screen, a cheerful instructor explained the subtle differences between formal and informal speech, and Emma absorbed every word with the focus of a scholar twice her age. She didn't notice Marcus enter the kitchen with his guest, Takeshi Yamamoto, a potential investor from Tokyo whom Marcus was courting for a major deal. The two men spoke in rapid Japanese as they grabbed bottled water from the refrigerator, their conversation flowing with the casual assumption of privacy that came from speaking a language they believed no one else in the house understood. "Your home is impressive, Tanaka-san," Yamamoto said in Japanese, his tone formal and respectful. "Thank you," Marcus replied, also in Japanese, his voice carrying a note of pride. "I've worked hard to build all this. Unlike some people who are content to remain servants their entire lives." He gestured dismissively in the general direction of where Maria was working in the adjacent laundry room. Yamamoto chuckled, following Marcus's gaze. It landed on Emma, still sitting on the floor with her tablet, unnoticed in her corner. To him, she was just part of the scenery, no more significant than the potted orchids on the windowsill. "Is that the maid's child?" Yamamoto asked in Japanese, a slight sneer in his voice. "Yes," Marcus replied, switching to Japanese without a second thought. He felt emboldened by the linguistic privacy, saying things he might have censored in English. "She's here because the mother can't afford proper childcare." Pathetic, really. What kind of pathetic child sits on the floor of someone else's kitchen like some stray animal? No ambition, no future. Just another burden on society waiting to happen. The words hung in the air like poison, cruel and casual. Marcus didn't even lower his voice. Why would he? The child was 6 years old and clearly absorbed in whatever she was watching on that cheap, broken tablet. What could she possibly understand? Emma's fingers stopped moving on the screen. Her dark eyes, which had been bright with concentration, suddenly went very still. For a long moment she sat frozen, processing what she had just heard. Every word, every inflection, every ounce of contempt. She slowly removed her earbuds and set down her tablet. Her small hands trembled slightly, not with fear, but with something else. A dignity that even at 6 years old she knew was being violated. She stood up with careful precision, her small frame somehow carrying a presence that belied her size. Marcus and Yamamoto were still chuckling, moving toward the door, when Emma's clear, perfect Japanese cut through the air like a blade. "Tanaka-san," she said, her pronunciation flawless, her pitch accent refined beyond anything a 6-year-old should possess. "I believe you have confused pathetic with determined. An understandable mistake for someone who inherited his starting capital and calls it self-made." The effect was instantaneous and electric. Both men froze mid-step. Marcus spun around, his face draining of color as if he had seen a ghost speak. His mouth opened and closed twice before any sound emerged. You speak Japanese?" he finally stammered, the shock rendering him momentarily incapable of maintaining his usual composure. "Hai mochiron," Emma replied calmly. Yes, of course. Her child's voice carrying perfect grammatical structure and the formal speech patterns appropriate for addressing an adult. "I also speak Mandarin, Korean, French, and English. I taught myself using free educational videos. You see, some of us don't have the luxury of tutors in private schools, so we have to be resourceful. I apologize if my sitting on your floor offended your aesthetic sensibilities, but my mother works very hard, and I prefer to be near her rather than wander your mansion touching things that don't belong to me." The silence that followed was crushing. Yamamoto's eyes had gone wide with something between shock and what might have been shame. Marcus looked as if someone had struck him physically, his perfect facade cracking to reveal something raw and unprepared underneath. "As for having no ambition or future," Emma continued, her voice steady despite the slight quiver that betrayed her age and the courage this moment required. "I am 6 years old. I have taught myself 5 languages. I read at a 10th grade level, and I am currently studying advanced mathematics and molecular biology. I may not have your money, Tanaka-san, but I have something you seem to have lost along your path to success. I have hope, curiosity, and the humility to know I still have everything to learn." She paused, her dark eyes meeting his with a directness that was almost uncomfortable in its honesty. Then, with devastating simplicity, she delivered her final words in Japanese that was poetry in its precision. My mother taught me that true poverty isn't measured in bank accounts, but in the smallness of one's spirit. Looking at you now, Tanaka-san, I wonder which of us is truly the pathetic one. The words landed like thunder in that pristine kitchen. Emma held his gaze for one more moment, then calmly picked up her tablet, placed her earbuds back in her ears, and sat down again, returning to her language lesson as if she had merely commented on the weather. Marcus Tanaka, billionaire and self-made tech mogul, stood frozen in his own kitchen, unable to move, unable to speak, utterly and completely shattered by the words of a 6-year-old child sitting on his floor. His carefully constructed walls, built over decades of climbing and clawing his way to the top, had just been demolished in 60 seconds by someone he had dismissed as invisible. Yamamoto cleared his throat uncomfortably, his respect for Marcus visibly diminishing in real time. Perhaps, he said quietly in Japanese, we should continue our discussion in your office, Tanaka-san. But Marcus couldn't move. He was staring at Emma, really seeing her for the first time. And in her small, determined figure, he saw something that terrified him more than any business rival ever had. He saw his own mother, bent over a restaurant counter at midnight teaching herself English from borrowed books because she refused to let her immigrant status define her limitations. He saw his father, studying accounting textbooks by candlelight after 16-hour shifts because he dreamed of something more. He saw everything he had become and everything he had betrayed, and the weight of that recognition was crushing him where he stood. In the corner, Emma's tablet continued playing its language lesson, the cheerful instructor explaining the grammatical subtleties of respect and humility in Japanese culture, concepts that seemed suddenly, painfully relevant in ways that made Marcus Tanaka's billion-dollar empire feel very small indeed. The business meeting with Yamamoto ended 30 minutes later in Marcus's office, though neither man could truly focus on the investment proposal that lay between them. The numbers on the spreadsheets seemed meaningless, the projections hollow. Yamamoto's eyes kept drifting toward the door, as if he could still see that small girl sitting on the kitchen floor, delivering truth with the precision of a master swordsman. Tanaka-san, Yamamoto finally said, closing his leather portfolio with deliberate care. I will need some time to reconsider this partnership. I came here today expecting to meet a man of vision and honor. Instead, he paused, choosing his words with the careful diplomacy of Japanese business culture, but his meaning was crystal clear. Instead, I wonder if our values are aligned. Marcus wanted to defend himself, to explain, to justify, but what could he say? That he hadn't meant it? That would be a lie, and they both knew it. The words had come too easily, too naturally, revealing something poisonous that lived inside him. I understand, Marcus heard himself say, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. I will await your decision. After Yamamoto left, Marcus sat alone in his office for 20 minutes, staring at the wall of achievements that documented his rise to power. Harvard Business School diploma, Forbes 30, under 30 plaque, photos with tech industry titans and political leaders, each one a trophy, each one proof that Marcus Tanaka had transcended his humble origins and claimed his place among America's elite. But now, looking at them, all he could see was the distance he had traveled from the boy who used to help his mother prep vegetables in their tiny San Francisco restaurant, listening to her hum old Japanese folk songs while she worked 16-hour days. When had helping her become embarrassing? When had her sacrifice become something to hide rather than honor? He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found a name he hadn't called in 3 years. Mom. His finger hovered over the call button for a long moment before he set the phone down. What would he even say? How do you tell your mother that you've become the kind of person who mocks a 6-year-old child for being poor? How do you confess that somewhere along the path to success, you lost the ability to see people as human beings, rather than obstacles or opportunities? A soft knock on his office door interrupted his spiral of thoughts. Come in, he called, expecting his assistant. Instead, Maria Rodriguez entered, her hands clasped nervously in front of her uniform. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and Marcus realized with a sinking feeling that she had been crying. Mr. Tanaka, she began, her voice trembling slightly. I came to apologize for my daughter's behavior. It was disrespectful and— Stop. The word came out sharper than Marcus intended, and Maria flinched. He softened his tone, though it felt strange in his mouth, like speaking a language he had forgotten. Please, Mrs. Rodriguez. Sit down. Maria looked confused, even frightened. In 5 years of working for him, he had never invited her to sit in his presence. But she lowered herself carefully into the chair across from his desk, perched on its edge, as if ready to flee at any moment. "Your daughter," Marcus said slowly, each word requiring effort, "didn't do anything that requires an apology. I'm the one who—" He trailed off, finding it surprisingly difficult to complete the sentence. Apologizing was not something Marcus Tanaka did. Apologies were for people who made mistakes, and he had built his empire on the foundation of never admitting weakness. But looking at Maria's worried face, he saw his own mother again, the way she used to look when landlords came to discuss late rent, or when customers complained about the authentic Japanese food she prepared with such care, wanting it to taste more American. That perpetual anxiety of someone who worked harder than anyone else but still lived in fear of losing everything. "I said something cruel about Emma," he finally managed. "Something I had no right to say." She responded with more grace and intelligence than I deserved. "Your daughter is—" He struggled to find words adequate to describe what he had witnessed. "She's extraordinary, Mrs. Rodriguez. Truly extraordinary." Maria's eyes filled with fresh tears, but these were different. Tears of relief mixed with fierce maternal pride. "She is my miracle," Maria whispered. "I don't know where her mind comes from, Mr. Tanaka. I only finished high school, and her father—" She paused, pain flickering across her face. "Her father left when she was 2. Said he didn't sign up to raise a kid. But Emma, she started reading when she was 3. By 4, she was correcting my English grammar, now at 6. Maria shook her head in wonder. Maria shook her. "I can't afford fancy schools or tutors. That tablet she uses, I found it at Goodwill for $12. The screen is cracked, but it works. Every night after I come home from work, she shows me what she learned that day. Yesterday, she tried to explain quantum physics to me." Marcus felt something crack inside his chest, a pain that was almost physical. Here was a woman who worked herself to exhaustion for minimum wage, raising a prodigy alone. And she spoke of her daughter's achievements with pure joy, untainted by resentment or bitterness about everything she couldn't provide. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Marcus said, leaning forward. "What if Emma could attend the best schools? What if she had access to resources that matched her abilities?" Maria's face immediately closed off, becoming guarded. "Mr. Tanaka, we don't need charity. My daughter may not have much, but she has her dignity. I work for everything we have." "I'm not offering charity," Marcus said quickly, though he wasn't entirely sure what he was offering. The words were coming from somewhere instinctive, a place he had buried long ago. "I'm talking about investment. Your daughter has a gift that deserves cultivation. Let me think about this, please. Just don't make any decisions yet." Maria stood up slowly, her expression unreadable. "My shift ends at 6, Mr. Tanaka. Emma and I will be out of your house by then, as always." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Sir, may I say something?" "Of course. Emma has a gift, yes, but her greatest gift isn't her intelligence. It's her heart. She sees people, Mr. Tanaka. All people. Rich, poor, powerful, invisible. She sees them all as equally human, I hope." Maria's voice caught slightly. "I hope that whatever happens, the world doesn't take that away from her. The world has a way of making smart people hard. I pray she stays soft." After Maria left, Marcus sat in the gathering shadows of his office as afternoon faded toward evening. He didn't turn on the lights. He just sat there, turning Maria's words over in his mind like stones he was trying to understand. His phone buzzed with notifications. Deals closing, money moving, the machinery of wealth perpetuating itself. But for the first time in years, Marcus found he didn't care. Instead, he opened his laptop and typed into the search bar, "Educational Programs for Gifted Children, Los Angeles." The results were overwhelming. Dozens of programs, schools, and academies designed for children like Emma. But as he clicked through them, his initial enthusiasm began to deflate. The tuition costs were staggering. Even the scholarship programs required application fees, testing fees, and hidden costs that would be impossible for someone in Maria's position. The system was designed to keep exceptional children trapped in the circumstances of their birth, unless someone with resources intervened. Someone with resources. Like him. Marcus closed his laptop and walked to the window. looking out over his manicured grounds. In the distance, he could see the west terrace where Maria was supervising the gardeners, ensuring everything was perfect for guests he didn't actually care about impressing. And there, sitting in the shade of a massive oak tree, was Emma, her cracked tablet balanced on her crossed legs, her young face serious with concentration. As he watched, one of the gardeners, Miguel, a man in his 50s who had worked on the grounds for 3 years, approached Emma, gesturing toward a flowering bush. Marcus couldn't hear their conversation from this distance, but he saw Emma's face light up with delight. She set down her tablet and followed Miguel to the bush where he appeared to be teaching her about the plants. Emma listened with rapt attention, then pulled a small notebook from her pocket, the kind that cost 50 cents at a dollar store, and began writing furiously. Miguel laughed at something she said, his weathered face creasing with genuine affection. Maria, noticing the interaction, smiled, not the careful, professional smile she gave Marcus, but a real one, full of warmth. Marcus realized he was witnessing something he had lost the ability to experience. Genuine human connection untainted by transaction or hierarchy. Miguel wasn't teaching Emma about plants because he hoped for something in return. Maria wasn't smiling because it was required by her employment contract. Emma wasn't absorbing knowledge because she wanted to impress anyone. They were simply 3 people sharing a moment of authentic humanity. When had his world become so transactional? When had every interaction become a calculation of advantage and opportunity? His parents hadn't raised him this way. They had worked themselves to exhaustion, yes, but they had also made time to teach him origami, to share meals with struggling immigrant families in their community, to remember that prosperity without compassion was just another form of poverty. His grandfather's face flashed through his memory, the man who had given Marcus his initial investment capital. Takeshi Tanaka Sr. had survived internment camps during World War II, rebuilt his life from nothing twice over, and still managed to greet every person he met with dignity and respect. Money is a tool, Marcus, his grandfather had told him during their last conversation before cancer took him. But the measure of a man isn't what he builds with it. It's whether he remembers what he's building it for. Marcus had been 23 then, hungry and ambitious, and he had nodded impatiently, eager to get the check and start his empire. He had thought he understood. But standing here now, watching a 6-year-old child who owned nothing but possessed everything that mattered, he realized he had understood nothing at all. His phone rang, jarring him from his thoughts. The caller ID showed his lawyer's number. Marcus almost declined the call, but years of disciplined business habits made him answer. Marcus, we have a problem with the Chen acquisition, his lawyer began without preamble. They're threatening to walk unless we agree to their employment terms. They want guarantees that we won't lay off their existing staff for at least 2 years after the merger. 2 years ago, Marcus would have laughed at such terms. Staff were expendable, numbers on a spreadsheet to be optimized. He had built his fortune partly through ruthless efficiency, acquiring companies and streamlining them, which was a polite way of saying he fired people. What are they asking specifically? Marcus heard himself say. The lawyer outlined the terms, his tone suggesting he expected Marcus to reject them outright. But as Marcus listened, all he could think about was Maria's face when she talked about working for everything she had, about dignity, about the fear of losing it all. Accept their terms, Marcus said quietly. There was a long pause. I'm sorry, did you say accept? Yes, accept their terms, all of them. If keeping people employed for 2 years reduces our profit margin by 15%, then that's what it costs. Sometimes. Marcus paused, the words feeling foreign but right. Sometimes the cost of doing business includes allowing people to keep their dignity. Another pause. Marcus, are you feeling all right? This isn't like you. No, Marcus agreed. It's not, but maybe it should be. Draw up the papers. He ended the call and returned to the window. Emma had finished her botany lesson with Miguel and was now helping her mother fold clean linens, chatting animatedly about something. Even from this distance, Marcus could see the love between them, uncomplicated, pure, the kind of wealth that couldn't be deposited in banks. A memory surfaced, unbidden and sharp. His 8th birthday. His parents had scraped together enough money to buy him a used bicycle, and he had cried because all the other kids at school had new ones. His mother had knelt down, her hands rough from restaurant work, and gently wiped his tears. Marcus-chan, she had said in Japanese, using the affectionate diminutive. Tears of shame are the heaviest burden. That bicycle carries you the same distance whether it's new or old. The question is, where do you want it to take you? Toward gratitude or toward bitterness? Choose carefully because that choice will determine all your other journeys. He had chosen bitterness, he realized now. Every success had been fueled by the desire to never feel less than again, to never be the kid with the used bike, to never be poor. And in achieving that goal, he had become poor in ways that mattered far more than money. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that his expensive mansion couldn't improve upon. Marcus watched as Maria and Emma finished their work and gathered their belongings. Emma carefully packed her cracked tablet into a worn backpack, then took her mother's hand. They walked toward the service exit, their figures growing smaller. Just before they disappeared from view, Emma stopped and turned back, looking directly up at Marcus's office window. Their eyes met across the distance, and for a moment, neither moved. Then Emma did something unexpected. She bowed, a small but perfect Japanese bow of respect, the kind that acknowledged shared humanity rather than hierarchy. Marcus found his hand rising in an automatic response, a wave that felt inadequate but honest. Emma smiled, not the triumphant smile of someone who had won a victory, but something gentler, something that suggested forgiveness might be possible if he proved willing to earn it. Then she and Maria were gone, leaving Marcus alone in his mansion with all his achievements and none of the things that actually mattered. He returned to his desk and opened his laptop again. This time he didn't search for programs. Instead, he opened his email and began typing a message to his personal assistant. I need you to research something for me. Quietly, discreetly. I want to know everything about scholarship programs, trust funds, and educational endowments. Not for publicity, not for tax benefits, just because it's right. We'll discuss details tomorrow. Then he did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He picked up his phone, found his mother's contact, and pressed call. The phone rang 3 times before she answered, her voice cautious with surprise. Marcus, is something wrong? No, Mom, he said, his voice cracking slightly on the words. Nothing's wrong, I wanted to hear your voice. I wanted to tell you about something that happened today. About a little girl who reminded me of who you taught me to be. As he began to tell her about Emma, about his shame and his awakening, Marcus Tanaka, billionaire, self-made mogul, and former cynic, felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He felt the first stirrings of hope that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to become someone his parents could be proud of again. Outside, the California night descended on Beverly Hills, and somewhere in East LA, a 6-year-old girl was probably teaching herself another language, building bridges between worlds that people like Marcus paid fortunes to keep separate. But not anymore. Not if he could help it. 3 days passed before Marcus saw Emma again. 3 days during which he barely slept, spending his nights researching educational programs and his days distracted during business meetings. His assistant, Jennifer, had noticed the change immediately, commenting with careful concern that Mr. Tanaka seemed elsewhere lately. She wasn't wrong. Marcus was elsewhere, trapped in a spiral of memories and realizations that made his billion-dollar empire feel hollow. He had called his mother twice more, conversations that stretched past midnight as he told her things he'd never admitted to anyone. His loneliness, his regrets, the person he'd become versus the person he'd meant to be. Marcus-chan, his mother had said during their last call, her voice soft with the wisdom of someone who had survived harder things than wealth could ever present. Redemption isn't a destination, it's a direction. You don't erase the past by feeling guilty. You honor it by choosing differently today than you did yesterday. Now, on Thursday morning, Marcus found himself doing something unprecedented. He had canceled his morning meetings and asked Maria if she could bring Emma to work an hour earlier than usual. He had framed it as needing to discuss household logistics, but both he and Maria knew it was more than that. Maria arrived at 7:30 sharp, Emma's small hand clasped in hers. The little girl wore a faded purple t-shirt with a dinosaur on it, and jeans that were slightly too short, revealing ankles that would soon require new pants. Her backpack, decorated with patches that Maria had clearly sewn on to cover worn spots, hung from one shoulder. But her eyes were bright and alert, taking in everything with that same startling intelligence Marcus had witnessed 3 days ago. "Good morning, Mrs. Rodriguez. Emma," Marcus said, emerging from his office. He had dressed more casually than usual, no suit jacket, sleeves rolled up. As if formality might create distance he was trying to bridge. "Good morning, Mr. Tanaka," Maria replied, her posture still carrying professional caution. Emma said nothing, simply watching him with those observant dark eyes that seemed to see too much. "Emma, I was wondering if you'd join me in my office for a few minutes," Marcus said, directing his words to the child rather than asking permission from her mother. "I'd like to talk with you, if that's okay." Emma glanced up at her mother, a silent question passing between them. Maria hesitated, then nodded slightly. "I'll be in the kitchen if you need me, mija." Emma followed Marcus into his office, her steps careful on the expensive carpet. He gestured toward a comfortable chair, the same one where executives and millionaires usually sat to negotiate deals, and Emma climbed into it, her feet dangling several inches from the floor. Marcus sat across from her, suddenly uncertain how to begin. How did you apologize to a 6-year-old for seeing her as invisible? How did you explain to a child that she had cracked open something in you that years of therapy and success hadn't touched? "I owe you an apology," he finally said, abandoning his usual corporate polish for simple honesty. "What I said about you the other day was cruel, ignorant, and completely wrong. I judged you based on circumstances you can't control rather than seeing who you actually are. I'm sorry, Emma, truly sorry." Emma studied him for a long moment, her expression serious beyond her years. "Mama says you should always accept sincere apologies," she said slowly, her English as precise as her Japanese had been. "But she also says that apologies without changed behavior are just words. So I'm waiting to see if you mean it, Mr. Tanaka." Marcus felt a smile tug at his lips despite the gravity of the moment. "Your mother is a wise woman, and you're absolutely right to wait. Words are easy. Actions matter." He leaned forward slightly. "Emma, I've spent the last 3 days learning about you. Not snooping," he added quickly, seeing her eyes narrow, "but asking your mother questions with her permission. She told me you've taught yourself 5 languages, that you're reading at a 10th grade level, that you want to be a scientist someday." "A molecular biologist," Emma corrected with the specificity of someone who had given the matter serious thought. "I want to study genetic diseases and help find cures. My abuela, my grandmother, died from something called Huntington's disease when I was 4. Mama says it's genetic, which means it's in the DNA. I want to understand DNA so well that I can figure out how to fix it when it breaks." The clarity of her purpose, delivered in that small voice, hit Marcus like a physical blow. At 6 years old, this child had already identified her life's mission, driven by love and loss rather than ego or ambition. What had he been doing at 6? Probably complaining about used toys. "That's an extraordinary goal," Marcus said quietly, "and I have no doubt you could achieve it. But Emma, the truth is that talent and intelligence aren't enough in this world. You need resources, opportunities, access to education that can match your abilities. Your mother works incredibly hard, but the system is designed to keep exceptional people trapped unless someone helps open doors." Emma's expression became guarded. "Are you offering to help because you feel guilty, or because you actually think I deserve it?" The question was so direct, so perceptive, that Marcus actually laughed. A real laugh, not his practiced business chuckle. "You don't pull punches, do you?" "Mama says honesty saves time," Emma replied with a small shrug. "Your mother is right about a lot of things." Marcus took a breath, choosing his next words carefully. 3 days ago, I would have said I was offering help because of guilt. But I've spent 72 hours thinking about very little else, and I've realized something. Yes, I feel guilty. I should feel guilty. But more than that, I feel angry at myself for almost missing this, for almost letting prejudice and arrogance blind me to someone extraordinary. So I'm offering to help for both reasons, because I was wrong, and because you're exceptional. Is that honest enough? Emma considered this, her small face thoughtful. "What kind of help?" "I want to set up an educational trust fund for you," Marcus said. "Money that would pay for the best schools, the best tutors, university when you're ready. Whatever you need to become that molecular biologist who cures genetic diseases. No strings attached. Your mother would control it completely until you're 18. It would be yours, not mine. I'm just opening a door that should never have been closed in the first place. He expected excitement, maybe gratitude. Instead, Emma's face clouded with something that looked almost like disappointment. Mr. Tanaka, that's very generous. But I don't want to be your charity project. I don't want to be the poor kid you saved so you can feel better about yourself. The words stung precisely because they contained truth. Marcus forced himself not to deflect or defend, but to sit with the discomfort. You're right that it would make me feel better. But Emma, here's what I've learned. Sometimes things can be true in multiple ways at once. Yes, this would ease my conscience, but it's also objectively the right thing to do. You have a gift that deserves cultivation. The world needs people like you, people who want to cure diseases and help others. Why should that gift be wasted because of economic circumstances that have nothing to do with merit? Because accepting help from you would mean I didn't do it on my own, Emma said, and for the first time, her voice carried the frustration of a child rather than the wisdom she usually projected. Everyone would say I only succeeded because some rich man gave me money. They wouldn't see me, they'd see your donation. Marcus sat back, stunned by the sophistication of her concern. At 6 years old, she was already grappling with the politics of perception, the ways that help could be simultaneously necessary and undermining. How many hours had she spent thinking about this? How many times had she watched her mother struggle and thought about pride versus pragmatism? Emma, he said slowly, can I tell you about my grandfather? She nodded, curiosity replacing the defensive frustration in her eyes. His name was Takeshi Tanaka. He came to America in 1939 when he was 19 years old. He worked in vegetable fields, saved every penny, and opened a small grocery store in San Francisco. Then World War II started, and the government sent him and my grandmother to an internment camp, prison basically, just for being Japanese. They lost everything. The store, their savings, their home, everything. Emma's eyes widened with recognition. We learned about that in school. They called them relocation centers, but our teacher said that was a lie. They were concentration camps. Your teacher was right, Marcus confirmed, impressed once again. After the war, my grandfather was released with nothing. He was 25 years old and had to start over completely. But here's the thing. He didn't do it alone. There was a black family in his neighborhood, the Washingtons, who had protected some of his possessions during the war. They gave him a place to stay, lent him money to restart, and helped him rebuild. My grandfather never forgot that. He always said his success wasn't his alone. It was built on the shoulders of people who helped when they didn't have to. Marcus leaned forward, his voice intense with the importance of what he was trying to convey. When he gave me the money to start my first company, do you know what he said? He said, "This isn't your money, Marcus. This is the Washingtons' generosity, traveling through time. You didn't earn it, and you don't deserve it any more than anyone else. But you have it. So the only question is, what will you do with it? Will you hoard it and call it yours? Or will you let it flow through you to someone else who needs it? The way it flowed to me." Emma was quiet, absorbing this. What happened to the Washington family? By the time I was old enough to understand the story, most of them had passed away. But my grandfather made sure their grandchildren had scholarships for college. He never took credit for it. He did it anonymously through a foundation. He said it wasn't charity. It was justice. He was just returning what had been given to him. So you're saying, Emma said slowly, working through the logic, that accepting help doesn't mean I didn't do it on my own. It means I'm part of something bigger than just me. Exactly. Marcus felt a rush of relief that she understood. And Emma, here's the truth. You've already proven yourself. You taught yourself 5 languages with a broken tablet. You're 6 years old and discussing molecular biology. No amount of money can create that. Money can only give you the tools to build what's already inside you. The building part? That's all you. Emma chewed her lower lip, a gesture that reminded Marcus she was, after all, still a very young child carrying very adult concerns. Can I think about it? And talk to Mama? Of course, Marcus said immediately. This is your and your mother's decision, not mine. I'm just offering. And Emma, whatever you decide, it doesn't change my apology. I was wrong about you and I'm sorry. That stands whether you accept help or not. Emma slid down from the chair, her backpack rustling. At the door, she paused and turned back. "Mr. Tanaka, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why did you forget your grandfather's lesson about money flowing through you instead of staying with you?" The question landed with devastating accuracy, exposing the central failure of Marcus's adult life. He could have deflected, could have given a corporate non-answer, but this child had earned his honesty. "Because somewhere along the way I started believing that having money meant I was better than people who didn't," he said quietly. "I confused wealth with worth. I thought if I accumulated enough success I could finally prove I wasn't that poor immigrant kid anymore. But you know what I realized 3 days ago? I spent so much energy trying not to be poor that I became empty in a different way. Your mother has something I lost. She knows the difference between being broke and being poor. Being broke is temporary. Being poor is when you lose your humanity. I became very, very poor while having a lot of money." Emma nodded slowly, as if his answer confirmed something she had suspected. "Mama says the richest day of her life was the day I was born, even though we had to use Medi-Cal at the county hospital, and she couldn't afford anything except the most basic care. She says I made her rich in ways money never could." "Your mother," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion, "is the smartest person in this house." After Emma left to join her mother, Marcus sat alone in his office, staring at nothing. The conversation had shaken something loose in him, some calcified part of his soul that had been locked away for years. He pulled out his phone and opened his banking app, looking at the balance that represented his net worth. The numbers were staggering, more money than he could spend in several lifetimes. But what was it for? What was the point of all this accumulated wealth if it just sat there, growing like some kind of cancerous mass, consuming his humanity in the process? His phone rang. His mother. "Mom," he answered, "I think I'm finally starting to understand what grandfather meant. About money flowing through you." His mother's voice carried a smile. "What changed?" "I met someone who reminded me what wealth actually looks like," Marcus said. "She's 6 years old and she's richer than I'll ever be." His mother was quiet for a moment. "Your grandfather would be proud of you today, Marcus. Not for your success, for your awakening. It's never too late to remember who you are." After they hung up, Marcus opened his laptop and began drafting an email to his lawyers. But this time it wasn't about acquisitions or investments or profit margins. This time, it was about setting up something his grandfather would recognize. A foundation dedicated to identifying brilliant children trapped by circumstances, giving them resources without strings, letting money flow the way water flows, toward the places that need it most. He would call it the Takeshi Tanaka Foundation. And Emma Rodriguez, if she agreed, would be the first recipient. Not the last, just the first of many. A door opening, a current starting to flow, returning to the world what had been given to him so long ago. Outside, the California sun climbed higher, and somewhere in his kitchen, a 6-year-old genius was probably teaching her mother a new Japanese phrase, building bridges one word at a time, proving that the most valuable things in the world couldn't be deposited in banks. But they could, Marcus was learning, be invested in people, and that investment paid dividends that actually mattered. The decision came 2 weeks later, delivered not with fanfare but with quiet dignity that had become Maria Rodriguez's signature. She arrived at Marcus's office on a Tuesday morning, her uniform pressed as always, but something in her posture suggested this wasn't just another workday. "Mr. Tanaka, do you have a moment?" she asked from the doorway, her hands clasped in front of her in that familiar nervous gesture. "Of course, Mrs. Rodriguez. Please come in." Marcus gestured to the chair, noting that she no longer hesitated before sitting, though she still perched on the edge rather than settling back comfortably. "Emma and I have talked," Maria began, her voice steady despite the obvious emotion beneath it. "We've talked every night for 2 weeks. We've prayed. We've cried. We've argued. Well, as much as you can argue with a 6-year-old who has better logic than most adults." A small smile flickered across her face. "She has questions I can't answer, Mr. Tanaka. Questions about string theory and genetic mutations and things I don't even understand enough to spell correctly. I watch her fall asleep every night with that cracked tablet on her chest. And I know that I can't give her what she needs." Maria's voice caught and she paused to compose herself. Marcus waited, his heart pounding in a way that no business deal had ever provoked. But here's what I told her, Maria continued, her eyes meeting his directly for the first time in their conversation. I told her that accepting help isn't the same as accepting charity. I told her about my own mother who came to this country with nothing and cleaned houses so I could finish high school. My mother had her pride, but she also had her wisdom. She used to say, "Mija, pride that keeps you from feeding your children isn't pride. It's vanity disguised as virtue." Marcus felt his throat tighten but said nothing, letting Maria speak. "So we're saying yes, Mr. Tanaka. Yes to the trust fund, yes to the opportunities, but—" She held up a hand, her expression fierce with maternal protection. "We have conditions." "Name them," Marcus said immediately. "First, Emma continues to live with me. I don't care how fancy the school is or how far away. She comes home to our apartment every single night. She will not forget where she comes from or who her people are." "Absolutely," Marcus agreed. "I wouldn't have it any other way." "Second, I continue to work. I will not become dependent on your generosity. I will not teach my daughter that money just appears because someone feels guilty. She will see me working, see me earning, see me contributing." "Mrs. Rodriguez, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," Maria interrupted firmly. "I do have to. Not for you, for her, for me. My dignity isn't negotiable, Mr. Tanaka. It's the only inheritance my mother left me, and I will not squander it." Marcus nodded, humbled by the steel in her voice. "I understand. You'll continue working, same salary, same position. Though I'd like to discuss a raise that has nothing to do with Emma. You've been underpaid for years, and that's on me. Third," Maria continued as if he hadn't spoken, "Emma will know that this is temporary help, not a permanent rescue. When she's successful, and she will be successful, Mr. Tanaka, with or without your money, she will pay it forward. She will help the next brilliant child trapped by poverty. This generosity doesn't end with her. It flows through her. Just like my grandfather's lesson," Marcus said softly. "I couldn't agree more." And finally, Maria's voice dropped to almost a whisper, but her words carried the weight of absolute authority. "If you ever make her feel less than, if you ever make her think she owes you anything beyond basic respect, if you ever use this help as leverage or control, I will walk away with her so fast it will make your head spin. This is a gift, Mr. Tanaka, not a leash. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear," Marcus said, and he meant it. "Mrs. Rodriguez, those aren't conditions, they're exactly what should happen. I'm grateful you're allowing me to help, not the other way around." Maria's shoulders sagged slightly, tension releasing. "Emma wants to tell you herself. She's waiting outside." Emma entered with the same careful dignity as her mother, her backpack slung over one shoulder, that cracked tablet visible through the worn fabric. But her eyes were bright with something Marcus hadn't seen before. Excitement tempered with caution, hope restrained by wisdom. "Mr. Tanaka," she said formally, "I've decided to accept your help, but I want you to know why." "I'm listening," Marcus said, giving her his complete attention. "At first I thought accepting help meant I was weak, that it meant I couldn't do it on my own. But Mama helped me understand something." Emma's voice carried the careful pronunciation of someone who had rehearsed these words. "Nobody does anything completely on their own. You had your grandfather and the Washington family. I have Mama, and now you. The scientist who discovers the cure for Huntington's disease won't do it alone. She'll stand on the shoulders of thousands of other scientists who came before. That's how humans work. We're not meant to do everything alone." She paused, pulling her tablet from her backpack. "I looked up Takeshi Tanaka Sr. I found articles about him in the historical archives online. Do you know what I learned?" Marcus shook his head, curious where this was going. After he rebuilt his business, he spent 40 years helping other Japanese-American families who had lost everything in the camps. He never took credit. He never made them feel small. He just opened doors and let them walk through with their dignity intact. Emma's eyes glistened slightly. "I want to be like him, Mr. Tanaka. Not like the version of you who mocked me in the kitchen. I'm sorry, but I have to be honest. But like your grandfather, I want to be someone who opens doors." The truth of her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. She was right, devastatingly right. She didn't want to be like the man he was. She wanted to be like the man he should have been. "You're already more like him than I've been in 20 years, Marcus admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "But maybe we can both learn to be better. Would you be willing to teach me, Emma, about humility and kindness and remembering where we come from?" Emma considered this seriously, her 6-year-old face carrying the weight of ancient wisdom. "I think Mama would be better at teaching you than me. She already knows all that stuff. I'm still learning too." "Then maybe we can all learn together," Marcus suggested. "Deal," Emma said, and stuck out her small hand for a handshake. Marcus took it gently, marveling at how something so small could carry so much power. This child's hand, which had taught itself to write in 5 languages, which had swiped through countless educational videos on a cracked screen, which held her mother's hand every day as they walked from bus stops to work. This hand was going to change the world someday, and he was being given the privilege of helping make that possible. "So what happens now?" Emma asked practically. "Do I go to a new school tomorrow or something?" Marcus laughed. "Not quite that fast. We have a lot of planning to do. Testing to figure out exactly where your abilities are. School visits to find the right fit. But Emma, I want you to understand something important. This isn't about changing who you are. It's about giving you the tools to become more fully yourself." Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus's life transformed in ways he couldn't have anticipated. He accompanied Maria and Emma to educational consultants who tested Emma's abilities and sat in stunned silence as the results came back. She tested at high school level in reading comprehension, 8th grade level in mathematics, and her linguistic abilities were simply off the charts. The consultant had never seen a 6-year-old with such mastery of multiple languages. "Mr. Tanaka," the consultant had said privately, "I've worked with gifted children for 30 years. I've seen prodigies, savants, children with extraordinary specific talents. But Emma is something different. She's not just smart, she's wise. She has emotional intelligence that matches her intellectual capacity. That's exceptionally rare. The challenge won't be finding a school smart enough for her, it'll be finding one human enough." They visited 7 schools over 2 weeks. The first 5 had been prestigious, expensive, and utterly wrong. The administrators spoke about Emma as if she were a science experiment, discussing her exceptional metrics and how she would elevate their institutional profile. Emma had sat through these meetings with increasing quietness, her initial excitement dimming with each visit. "They talk about me like I'm a trophy," she had whispered to her mother after the 5th school. "Like having me there would make them look good, not like they actually want to teach me." The 6th school was different. Mission Academy was a small private school in Pasadena, with a progressive philosophy and a scholarship program that emphasized character alongside intelligence. The director, Dr. Patricia Morrison, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a PhD in childhood development, had spent the first 30 minutes of their meeting not testing Emma, but simply talking with her about her interests. "What's your favorite thing to learn about?" Dr. Morrison had asked. "Everything," Emma had answered honestly, "but especially things that help people. I don't just want to know stuff to know it, I want to know it so I can do something good with it." Dr. Morrison had smiled. "That's the best reason to learn anything. Knowledge without purpose is just noise." "But Emma, can I ask you something? What scares you about going to a new school?" Emma had been quiet for a long moment. "I'm scared that everyone will know I'm the scholarship kid, the one who's only there because of charity. I'm scared they'll think I'm not as good as them because my clothes come from thrift stores and my mom cleans houses." "Those are legitimate fears, Doctor," Morrison had said gently, not dismissing or minimizing them. "And I can't promise that no one will ever make you feel that way. Children can be thoughtless sometimes. But I can promise you this. At Mission Academy, we teach that every student brings value that has nothing to do with their parents' bank accounts. We have children of tech executives sitting next to children of bus drivers, and we expect them all to treat each other with respect. Not because it's a nice idea, but because it's the right way to live." She had turned to Marcus then. "Mr. Tanaka, I appreciate your willingness to fund Emma's education. But I want to be clear. If Emma attends Mission Academy, she's not here as your charity case or your project. She's here as Emma Rodriguez, a student who earned her place through her abilities and character. We don't publicize who pays tuition and who receives scholarships. As far as anyone here knows, she's just another student. Can you accept that? That's exactly what I want, Marcus had said, feeling a surge of gratitude toward this woman who understood what he'd been fumbling toward. Emma had looked up at her mother with eyes full of hope. Can this be my school, Mama? And Maria, tears streaming down her face, had simply nodded. Now, 3 weeks after that initial conversation in Marcus's office, everything was in motion. The trust fund was established. Emma was enrolled at Mission Academy starting in the fall. Marcus had hired a part-time tutor, a retired professor who specialized in gifted education, to work with Emma over the summer, not to push her ahead, but to help her learn at her natural pace without frustration. But the biggest change wasn't in Emma's circumstances. It was in Marcus himself. He had started volunteering at a local community center in East LA, teaching basic financial literacy to immigrant families. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, he left his mansion and drove to a neighborhood he once would have avoided, spending 2 hours helping people understand bank accounts, credit, and basic budgeting. The first few sessions had been awkward, his expensive clothes and car marking him as an outsider. But gradually, people had warmed to him, especially when they realized he was actually listening to their struggles rather than lecturing down at them. One evening, an older woman named Mrs. Chen had approached him after class. "You're different from most rich people," she'd said in heavily accented English. "Most rich people, they want to give money, but not time. Money is easy. Time means you actually care." Those words had lodged in Marcus's chest and stayed there. He had also reconnected with his parents in ways he hadn't since college. His mother had visited for a week, meeting Emma and Maria, and Marcus had watched in wonder as these 3 women, separated by age, culture, and circumstance, had found immediate connection. His mother had taught Emma to make onigiri, and Emma had taught his mother basic Spanish phrases. They had laughed together in his kitchen, filling his mansion with warmth it had never contained. "Your father would have loved that little girl," his mother had said on her last evening. "She reminds me of you before you forgot yourself. Smart, curious, kind. I'm glad you're finding your way back, Marcus-chan." Now, on a warm evening in late July, Marcus sat in his office reviewing the foundation papers his lawyers had drawn up. The Takeshi Tanaka Foundation was officially registered, funded with $20 million for the first year, with plans to grow. Emma Rodriguez was recipient number 1, but applications were already being reviewed for 10 more children. A knock on his door interrupted his review. Emma peeked in, no longer waiting for permission to enter his space. "Mr. Tanaka? Mama says dinner is almost ready. She made pozole. It's Mexican soup, and she wants to know if you'd like to join us in the kitchen." Marcus looked up, startled. "Your mother cooked dinner? Here?" "I asked her to," Emma said with a shrug. "You always eat alone in your dining room, and that seems sad. We eat together at home, it's nicer. So I thought maybe you could eat with us tonight, if you want." Marcus felt his eyes sting with unexpected emotion. How long had it been since someone cooked for him? Not as a paid service, but as an act of care. How long since he'd eaten a meal with other people that wasn't a business function? "I would love that," he said quietly. "Thank you, Emma." They ate together in the kitchen, Marcus, Maria, and Emma, around the small table where Maria usually took her lunch break. The pozole was rich and warming, full of hominy and tender pork, and deep, complex flavors that came from recipes passed down through generations. They talked about Emma's summer reading list, about Maria's sister in Texas, about nothing and everything. And for the first time in years, Marcus Tanaka sat in his mansion and felt like he was home. 6 months can change everything. By January, Emma had been at Mission Academy for a full semester, and the transformation was remarkable. She had found her tribe, a small group of equally curious children who didn't care that her backpack was secondhand, or that her mother worked as a housekeeper. They cared that she could explain complex scientific concepts in ways that made sense, that she was learning her 6th language, Arabic, because she wanted to read scientific papers from Middle Eastern researchers in their original language, and that she never made anyone feel stupid for not knowing something. Dr. Morrison had pulled Marcus aside after the first parent-teacher conference. "I've been in education for 40 years, she'd said, her eyes bright with excitement. "And I've never seen a child like Emma. She's not just academically advanced. She's emotionally generous with her knowledge. She tutors other students during lunch without being asked. She's patient, kind, and has this extraordinary ability to make complex ideas accessible. Mr. Tanaka, you didn't just help a gifted child. You helped a future teacher, leader, and healer. But while Emma blossomed at school, something unexpected was developing at home, or rather at Marcus's mansion, which had slowly, imperceptibly, become a second home for both Emma and Maria. It had started small. Emma doing homework at Marcus's kitchen table while Maria worked. Marcus wandering in to ask about her day, and ending up discussing cellular biology for an hour. Weekend dinners that became regular occurrences. Maria teaching Marcus to cook traditional Mexican dishes, while Emma practiced her languages with audio lessons playing in the background. Marcus's mansion, once a sterile monument to his success, had become alive with the sounds of family. Laughter echoed in hallways that had only known the click of expensive shoes on marble. The kitchen, previously used only by hired caterers, now smelled of homemade tortillas and his mother's Japanese curry. The West Terrace, where Emma had once sat invisible on the floor, now hosted impromptu science experiments and language practice sessions. Marcus had changed in ways that went deeper than anyone could have predicted. He had lost the sharp edge of arrogance that once defined him. His business associates noticed it first. His negotiations had become more collaborative, less ruthless. He still closed deals, but now he asked different questions. How will this affect employees? What's the human cost? Is there a way everyone can win? His profit margins had decreased by 12% over 6 months. His happiness had increased immeasurably. But it was a Thursday evening in mid-January when everything shifted in a direction none of them had anticipated. Marcus had invited Emma, Maria, and his mother, who was visiting again from San Francisco, for dinner. They were celebrating Emma's report card, straight A's, but more importantly, glowing comments from every teacher about her character, curiosity, and kindness. To Emma, Marcus raised his glass of wine while Emma lifted her apple juice. Who proves every day that intelligence without compassion is just noise, but intelligence with heart can change the world. Here, here, his mother added in Japanese, beaming at Emma with grandmotherly pride that had developed despite no biological connection. They were halfway through dessert, tres leches cake that Maria had made, when Marcus's phone buzzed insistently. He normally would have ignored it during dinner, but the name on the screen made him pause. His lawyer, calling at 8 p.m. "Excuse me," he said, stepping into his office. "This might be important." The conversation lasted 7 minutes. When Marcus returned to the dining room, his face had gone pale, his expression somewhere between shock and something else, something that looked almost like fear. "Marcus?" His mother stood immediately, reading his distress. "What's wrong?" Marcus looked at Maria, then at Emma, then back to Maria. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you months ago, but I didn't know how. And then time passed and it became harder and He was rambling. Unusual for someone usually so controlled. "You're scaring me, Mr. Tanaka," Maria said quietly, instinctively pulling Emma closer. Marcus sat down heavily, running his hands through his hair. 6 months ago, when I first started researching Emma's background for the trust fund, I had to gather documentation. Birth certificates, medical records, family history, standard procedure for this kind of financial arrangement. And in doing that research, I found something that changes everything. He looked directly at Maria. "Do you remember Emma's father? You told me he left when she was 2. Maria's face hardened instantly. "I remember. Daniel Reyes. He wanted nothing to do with fatherhood. Said a kid would ruin his life. I haven't heard from him in over 4 years. Did he ever tell you about his family? His parents?" "No. He didn't talk about them. I always assumed they were in Mexico, maybe." "Why?" Maria's voice had taken on a defensive edge. Marcus pulled out his phone, opening a document his lawyer had just confirmed. Daniel's mother's maiden name was Tanaka, Yuki Tanaka. The name hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Marcus's mother gasped softly, her hand going to her mouth. Maria looked confused. Emma, with her characteristic perception, had gone very still, her brilliant mind already racing ahead to what this might mean. "Yuki Tanaka was my father's younger sister," Marcus continued, his voice strained. She married a man named Roberto Reyes against my grandparents' wishes and moved to Texas. The family had a falling out. They never reconciled. She died about 10 years ago, and I barely remember her. I was only 25 and caught up in building my company. I never even met her son, Daniel. The implications crashed into the room like a tsunami. You're saying, Maria's voice was barely a whisper, that you're Daniel's cousin? Yes, which means, Marcus looked at Emma and his voice cracked with emotion. Emma, you're my family. You're my second cousin. You're blood. Emma's dark eyes went wide, processing this information with the same analytical precision she applied to everything else. So when you offered to help me, you didn't know we were related? I had no idea, Marcus said firmly. I swear to you, Emma, I offered to help because you deserved it, not because of any connection I didn't even know existed. I found out 2 months ago, and I've been trying to figure out how to tell you both. I was terrified you'd think everything I did was because of obligation, not choice. 2 months? Maria stood up, her voice rising. You knew for 2 months and didn't tell us? I didn't know how. Marcus stood too, his own voice desperate. Every day I wanted to tell you, but how do you bring that up? Oh, by the way, your deadbeat ex-boyfriend is my estranged cousin, so your daughter is my family. I was afraid you'd think it changed everything. That you'd think I only helped because of blood, not because Emma is extraordinary. I was afraid. His voice broke. I was afraid you'd leave and take her away from me, and I couldn't bear that. The last sentence hung in the air, naked and vulnerable in its honesty. Marcus's mother moved to Maria's side, placing a gentle hand on her arm. Maria, I understand your anger, but I know my son. This past 6 months I've watched him become the man his grandfather hoped he'd be. He didn't help Emma because of obligation. He helped her because she saved him. Blood doesn't change that. It just explains why her father's abandonment feels so personal to him now. She turned to Marcus, her voice gentle but firm. Tell them, Marcus, tell them the whole truth. Marcus sank back into his chair, his hands shaking slightly. When I found out about the connection, my first reaction was rage. Rage at Daniel for abandoning his daughter, my family, and never even telling me she existed. I tried to find him, to confront him, to make him see what he'd thrown away. But he's vanished. No current address, no contact information. He abandoned Emma so completely he might as well not exist. He looked up at Emma, tears now visible in his eyes. And then I realized he did to you what I almost did. He saw someone extraordinary and dismissed her as an inconvenience. He had the privilege of being your father and he squandered it. And I thought, what right do I have to judge him when 6 months ago I called you pathetic? When I was heading down the exact same path of privileged blindness. Emma had been quiet throughout this exchange, but now she spoke, her young voice cutting through the adult emotions with characteristic clarity. Mr. Tanaka, can I ask you something? Anything, Marcus said hoarsely. If you found out tomorrow that we weren't related, that there was a mistake in the records, would you still want us in your life? The question was so direct, so perfectly aimed at the heart of the matter, that Marcus actually laughed through his tears. Yes. God, yes. Emma, these past 6 months have been the happiest of my life. You and your mother have given me something I didn't even know I was missing. Family isn't about blood. My grandfather taught me that when he talked about the Washingtons. It's about who shows up, who stays, who chooses to love you. You could be genetically unrelated to me in every way and I would still consider you family. But we are related, Emma said thoughtfully. Which is kind of cool, actually. Does this mean your mom is like my great-aunt? Marcus's mother laughed, the tension breaking slightly. I suppose it does, if you want it to be. Emma looked up at her mother, the only person whose opinion ultimately mattered to her. Mama, are you mad? Maria had been quiet, processing. Now she looked at Marcus with an expression that was complex. Anger, confusion, but also something softer. I'm not mad about the relation. I'm hurt that you didn't tell us sooner. We've been eating dinner together for months and you kept this secret. That's not how family treats family, Mr. Tanaka. The formality of Mr. Tanaka after months of growing closeness landed like a slap. You're right, Marcus said immediately. I was a coward. I was so afraid of losing what we'd built that I protected myself instead of trusting you with the truth. I'm sorry, Maria. Truly sorry. Not as your employer or as some distant relative. but as someone who cares about you both more than I know how to express." Maria studied him for a long moment. Emma watched her mother with that intense observation she applied to everything, waiting to see which way this would tip. Finally, Maria spoke. "My daughter asked if I'm mad. The truth is, I don't know what I am. I need time to think about this, about what it means, about whether—" She paused, something flickering across her face that she quickly suppressed. "About a lot of things. Take all the time you need," Marcus said quickly. "Nothing has to change. Emma's trust fund, her school, everything. It all continues regardless of what you decide about. Us." The us hung in the air, undefined but heavy with possibility. Maria gathered her purse and reached for Emma's hand. "We should go. Thank you for dinner." "Mama," Emma said softly, "maybe we should stay and talk more." "Not tonight, mija," Maria said, her voice gentle but firm. "Tonight we need to go home and think." After they left, Marcus sat with his mother in silence for a long time. Finally, she spoke in Japanese, using the language of their private moments. "You love her," she said. "It wasn't a question." "Who, Emma?" Marcus replied, deliberately misunderstanding. "Don't play games with me, Marcus. I'm your mother. I saw how you looked at Maria tonight, how you've been looking at her for months. You love her." Marcus dropped his head into his hands. "Is it that obvious?" "To me, yes. To her?" His mother shrugged. His mother? She's been too busy being grateful and professional to see it. But tonight, when you said us, I saw her face. She knows now. The question is, what are you going to do about it? "Nothing," Marcus said firmly. "She works for me. There's a massive power imbalance. She might feel obligated or pressured. I won't put her in that position." "So you'll just pine from a distance?" his mother asked skeptically. "If that's what it takes to keep them in my life, yes." His mother sighed. "Your grandfather would be proud of your honor, but he'd also tell you that sometimes the bravest thing is to be honest about what you feel and let the other person make their own choice. You don't get to decide for Maria what she can handle or what she wants. That's another form of arrogance, Marcus." Marcus looked at his mother, seeing the wisdom in her words but terrified of the risk. What if he confessed his feelings and Maria felt pressured? What if it destroyed everything they'd built? What if he lost not just Maria, but Emma too? But then he thought about Emma's question. Would you still want us in your life? And he knew that whatever happened next, he had to trust the people he loved to handle the truth. That's what family did. Real family. Chosen family. The kind of family that was built not on blood obligation, but on showing up, staying present, and having the courage to be vulnerable even when it terrified you. Outside, the January night was cool and clear. Somewhere in East LA, Maria was probably tucking Emma into bed, both of them processing the evening's revelations. And in his mansion, Marcus sat with his mother and finally began to understand what wealth actually meant. It meant having people you couldn't bear to lose. It meant your heart being vulnerable to forces beyond your control. It meant that the most valuable things in life couldn't be bought, controlled, or guaranteed. It meant love. And love, Marcus was learning, required the one thing money couldn't purchase: courage. 3 weeks of careful distance followed the revelation. Maria still came to work, but the easy warmth that had developed between them was gone, replaced by professional courtesy that felt like a wall. Emma still did her homework at the kitchen table, but the spontaneous conversations about science and language had become subdued, as if she sensed the adult tensions swirling around her. Marcus threw himself into the foundation work, traveling to meet potential recipients, anything to avoid sitting alone in his mansion, thinking about what he'd lost. He had helped 15 children so far, each one extraordinary in their own way, but none of them filled the Emma and Maria-shaped hole in his life. It was his mother who finally intervened. She called on a Tuesday evening, her voice carrying that particular tone of maternal authority that transcended culture and language. "Marcus, this is ridiculous. You're both miserable. Maria is miserable. Emma told me yesterday that her mother cries after she thinks Emma is asleep." "Mom, I can't just—" "Yes, you can. Tomorrow is Emma's 7th birthday. Are you really going to let pride and fear keep you from celebrating with her?" Marcus's heart clenched. He'd known Emma's birthday was coming. He'd ordered a gift weeks ago, a professional telescope she'd mentioned wanting. But in the fog of the past 3 weeks, He'd convinced himself they wouldn't want him there. I wasn't invited, he said quietly. Then invite yourself. Show up with that telescope and your courage and tell them the truth. All of it. Trust them, Marcus. Trust that love is stronger than fear. The next evening, Marcus stood outside Maria's apartment in East LA, the telescope in its box under one arm, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might break through his chest. The building was old but well maintained, the kind of place where people took pride despite limited means. He could hear children playing in the courtyard, smell someone cooking pozole, hear the sound of life lived in community rather than isolation. He knocked on apartment 2B. Emma opened the door, her eyes going wide with surprise and delight. Mr. Tanaka, you came. I hope that's okay, Marcus said. I know I wasn't officially invited, but I couldn't miss your birthday, Emma. You're 7 now. That's a significant year. It's more than okay, Emma said, pulling him inside with surprising strength for someone so small. Mama, Mr. Tanaka is here. The apartment was tiny, smaller than Marcus's office, but it radiated warmth. Papel picado banners hung from the ceiling in bright colors. A small cake sat on the kitchen counter, decorated with careful love if not professional skill. Photos covered the walls. Emma as a baby, Maria's parents, family celebrations captured in time. Maria emerged from the bedroom, her eyes red-rimmed in a way that confirmed his mother's report about crying. She wore jeans and a simple blue sweater, her hair down around her shoulders instead of pulled back in her usual work bun. She looked beautiful and tired and wary all at once. Mr. Tanaka, she said carefully, this is a surprise. I'm sorry for showing up uninvited, Marcus said. But Emma, you said something to me 6 months ago, and it's been echoing in my head ever since. You said that true poverty isn't in bank accounts, it's in the smallness of one's spirit. Well, for 3 weeks I've been living in poverty. I've been so afraid of making things awkward or pressuring anyone that I've made everyone miserable instead, including myself. So I'm here, and I brought this. He held out the telescope box. Because Emma Rodriguez deserves to see the stars up close. And because I'm hoping we can talk. Really talk. All 3 of us. Emma took the telescope with reverent care, her eyes shining. Mama, look, it's a real telescope. A Celestron StarSense Explorer. Emma, that's too expensive, Maria started to say, but Marcus held up a hand. Maria, please. It's her birthday. And more importantly, it's not from me as your employer or as some distant relative. It's from me as someone who loves your daughter and wants to support her dreams. Whether you let me stay for cake or ask me to leave right now, this is hers. No strings attached. Maria's eyes filled with tears. You can stay. But Emma, mija, can you give us a few minutes? Set up the telescope by the window and see if you can spot anything. Emma, with her characteristic perceptiveness, nodded immediately. I'll be very busy with this very complicated telescope that definitely requires all my attention. She retreated to the window, though Marcus suspected she could probably hear every word. That child was extraordinary in every way. Maria gestured for Marcus to sit at the small kitchen table. She poured 2 cups of coffee from a pot that looked like it had been brewing for hours and sat across from him, her hands wrapped around her mug like it could protect her. I've been angry with you, she said without preamble. Not about the family connection. That was actually kind of amazing once I got past the shock, but you kept it secret for 2 months, Marcus. 2 months of dinners and laughter and growing close, and you didn't trust me with the truth. You're right, Marcus said immediately. I was a coward. I told myself I was protecting what we had, but really, I was protecting myself. I was afraid that if you knew, everything would change, that you'd think differently about my help, about our friendship, about, he trailed off, not sure how much to say. About what? Maria prompted, her dark eyes steady on his. This was it. The moment his mother had told him to be brave for. Marcus took a breath and chose truth over safety. About the fact that I've fallen in love with you, he said quietly. Completely, absolutely, terrifyingly in love with you. And I was afraid that if you knew about the family connection, you'd think that's why I felt this way. Or worse, that you'd feel obligated because of Emma, because of the trust fund, because of the power imbalance between us. I was afraid that telling you the truth about anything would mean losing everything. Maria set down her coffee cup with hands that trembled slightly. You love me? Yes. I love your strength and your dignity and the way you've raised Emma to be extraordinary despite having every excuse not to be. I love how you make pozole fill my mansion with warmth. I love that you refuse to let me take away your job because you knew Emma needed to see you work. I love—" his voice cracked. "I love everything about you, Maria. But I also know I'm your employer and I'm wealthy. And there's this massive imbalance between us and I would never ever want you to feel pressured. So if you want me to leave and never speak of this again, I will. I'll still fund Emma's education, still be her family from a distance, whatever you need. Your comfort and freedom matter more than my feelings." For a long moment, Maria said nothing. Then, softly, she began to speak. "5 years ago, I was cleaning your floors, and you walked past me like I was furniture. You never learned my name. You never said thank you. You were everything I had been taught to expect from rich people, cold, entitled, blind to anyone beneath your status." She paused, meeting his eyes. "6 months ago, my daughter humiliated you in your own kitchen, and instead of firing me or taking revenge, you let it break something open in you. You started becoming someone different. Someone who sees people. Someone who shows up and stays and cares." She reached across the table, taking his hands in hers, the first time she'd ever touched him voluntarily. "Marcus Tanaka, you're not the same man who mocked my daughter. You're not the same man who walked past me for 5 years without seeing me. You've become someone I respect. Someone I trust. Someone who—" She paused, emotion thick in her voice. "Someone I've been falling in love with too, and hating myself for it because I thought it was just gratitude or obligation or some kind of trauma response to finally being seen." Marcus felt his heart stop and restart. "You? What?" "I love you too, you idiot," Maria said, laughing and crying at the same time. "I love how you eat my pozole like it's the best thing you've ever tasted. I love how you ask Emma about her science projects and actually listen. I love that you call your mother now and that you volunteer in my neighborhood, teaching people things you could easily pay someone else to teach. I love that you're trying so hard to be better, to honor your grandfather's legacy, to become worthy of the privilege you were given." She squeezed his hands. "But I'm also terrified, Marcus. Terrified of the power difference. Terrified that someone will say I'm with you for your money. Terrified that Emma will think this is all some fairy tale that's going to end in disaster. Terrified that—" "We'll figure it out," Marcus interrupted gently. "Together. Maria, I don't have all the answers, but I know that what I feel for you has nothing to do with you working for me. In fact, let me make this simple." He pulled out his phone, typing quickly. "As of this moment, you are no longer my employee. I just sent an email to my assistant. Maria Rodriguez's employment is terminated, effective immediately, with 6 months severance pay and full benefits continuation." Maria's eyes went wide. "What?" "Marcus, I said I needed to work." "Then work somewhere else," Marcus said firmly. "Work at Emma's school if you want, Doctor." Morrison mentioned they need an administrative assistant. "Work at the foundation. We need someone who understands what it's like to struggle, to help us choose recipients. Work anywhere you want. But you're not working for me anymore, Maria. I won't date someone who works for me. I won't be that kind of man. So if you want to explore this, we're doing it as equals. I have money. You have dignity. Both are valuable. Neither is superior." Maria stared at him, then burst out laughing. "You're insane. You just fired me on my daughter's birthday." "I liberated you," Marcus corrected with a smile. "There's a difference." From the window, Emma's voice called out, "Does this mean Mama can kiss you now?" Because she's been wanting to for like 2 months and it's been really obvious. Both adults turned bright red. Maria called back, "Emma Rodriguez, you're supposed to be watching the stars." "I am. But the most interesting constellation is happening in the kitchen." Emma's voice was full of barely suppressed giggles. Marcus looked at Maria, his eyebrows raised in question. "Is that true? Have you wanted to kiss me?" "My daughter has a big mouth," Maria muttered, but she was smiling. "She's also," Marcus said softly, standing and moving to Maria's side of the table. Usually right about things. He knelt beside her chair, taking her hands again, his position deliberately lower than hers. No power, no leverage, just a man offering his heart. "Maria Rodriguez, I love you. I want to date you properly, court you respectfully, meet your family, have you meet mine, Build something real that has nothing to do with work or obligation or gratitude. I want to celebrate Emma's birthdays and cook pozole and learn Spanish and be part of your lives not as a benefactor but as a partner. What do you say?" Maria looked down at him, this billionaire kneeling in her tiny kitchen offering her something more valuable than money. His authentic self, vulnerable and hopeful and real. "I say," she whispered, "that my mother was right. She used to tell me that the richest day of her life wasn't when she had money. It was when she had love. I thought I understood, but I didn't. Not until now." She leaned down and kissed him, soft and tentative and full of promise. From the window, Emma let out a cheer. "Finally! Do you know how hard it's been watching you two be so dumb about your feelings?" They broke apart laughing, and Marcus stood, pulling Maria up with him. "Come here, you brilliant matchmaker," he called to Emma. Emma abandoned her telescope and ran over, and suddenly Marcus found himself in a group hug with a 7-year-old genius and the woman he loved, in a tiny apartment in East LA that felt more like home than his mansion ever had. "So," Emma said, her voice muffled against their combined embrace, "does this mean we're really, officially a family now? Like for real?" Marcus looked at Maria over Emma's head, saw his own joy reflected in her eyes, and answered with absolute certainty, "Yes, for real, forever." And in that moment, Marcus Tanaka understood what his grandfather had been trying to teach him all along. Wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts or square footage or business deals. Wealth was measured in moments like this, in love freely given, in family chosen rather than obligated, in the courage to be vulnerable and the grace to be forgiven. He had started this journey as a billionaire who had everything and nothing. He was ending it as a man who had learned that the richest people weren't those who had the most, but those who gave the most of themselves. 6 months ago, a 6-year-old child had responded to his cruelty in flawless Japanese and shattered his carefully constructed walls. Tonight, that same child, now 7 and even more extraordinary, was teaching him the final lesson, that family wasn't about blood or money or obligation. It was about showing up, staying present, choosing each other, every single day. And that, Marcus finally understood, was the only kind of wealth that actually mattered. The Takeshi Tanaka Foundation had grown beyond Marcus's wildest dreams. 50 children now received support, not just financial, but mentorship, tutoring, and most importantly, dignity. Emma had helped interview several of the applicants, her questions cutting to the heart of what made someone worth investing in. Not test scores, but character. Not grades, but kindness. Maria worked as the Foundation's Director of Family Services, her insight invaluable in identifying which families truly needed help, versus which ones were trying to game the system. Her salary was fair, generous even, but she had insisted on market rate, not a penny more. "I work for this because I believe in it," she told Marcus firmly. "Not because I'm dating the founder." They had moved slowly, carefully. Marcus had met Maria's extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, who had initially been suspicious of this rich man dating their Maria, but who had gradually warmed when they saw how he looked at her, like she was the answer to questions he hadn't known to ask. Maria had spent time with Marcus's mother, the two women forming a bond that transcended their relationship to Marcus. They cooked together, shared stories of raising strong-willed children, and plotted ways to keep Marcus humble. Emma, thriving in 3rd grade but taking several 8th grade classes, had started a blog called Science for Everyone, where she explained complex concepts in simple terms. It had 50,000 followers and climbing. She signed every post. "Remember, knowledge is only valuable if you share it." Emma Rodriguez Tanaka. The hyphenated last name had been her idea. "We're all family," she'd announced one day, "so I want all our names." And on a warm evening in late January, 1 year and 1 day after Emma's 7th birthday, Marcus knelt in that same tiny apartment with a ring he'd designed himself. Simple, elegant, with a small diamond, because Maria had told him once that she didn't need flash, just sincerity. "Maria Rodriguez," he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "You saved my life without even trying. You and Emma showed me what wealth really means. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you?" Maria, tears streaming down her face, looked at Emma, who nodded vigorously and whispered, "Say yes, Mama. He's good for us." Yes, Maria said, laughing and crying. Yes, Marcus Tanaka. I will marry you. And as Marcus slipped the ring on her finger and pulled her into his arms, he heard his grandfather's voice in his memory one last time. Money is just a tool, Marcus. The measure of a man is what he builds with it. He had built something his grandfather would be proud of. Not an empire, not a fortune, but a family. A real one. The kind that mattered. And in the end, that was the only kind of wealth worth having.